Hi everyone, and welcome back to PDA Day UK. In this episode, I'm going to be interviewing Melanie Phipps, who is behind Positive PDA and also a PDA Summit that's happening on PDA Day on the 15th of May. So as I say, welcome back to PDA Day UK. Before we start, please do go hit like, hit subscribe and ring the bell. You'll always know when there's new content coming up. As I said before, we are interviewing today Melanie Phipps. Now, hi, Melanie. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Oh, not too bad, not too bad. As I said before, I mean, the reason we're talking is that obviously you and I got involved about the PDA Day Summit sort of thing that's happening on the 15th on Clubhouse. But you run Positively PDA as well. What was the genesis of all this for you? How did it begin?
I guess sort of following our own journey through PDA, I have 3 boys. My eldest is 18, my middle son is 17. He's diagnosed PDA, ASD, and my youngest is 10, who's also diagnosed ASD, but not PDA. Through our journey supporting my 17-year-old, we, I guess, encountered many sort of challenges through the education system and diagnosis. PDA, as you know, is not widely recognised.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. It was, I think when we came across it, it was a very life-changing moment for us in terms of me having to really change my lens on how I parent things. And we hit crisis point when he was about 8. And we went through all those challenges, came out the other side. But in terms of setting up Positively PDA, I wanted to kind of give back to the community that had been there supporting us through our more challenging times. And I reached a point at where we kind of come out the other side a little bit, and I had more time and energy to be able to do that. I sort of set up a support club on Clubhouse, which has been running about a year now, and it's been really, really successful. We've had really good feedback. We've got a brilliant community on there. And I just felt it was the right platform to put together something for PDA Day to bring the community together, bring some people that are known within the PDA community together to talk about different topics around PDA.
That's phenomenal. And you touched on a few things there. So I'll go back and you talked about the fact that you had to sort of relearn parenting. It's something that I've talked about, but not in detail, but it's something that I completely agree with. You have to completely relearn how to parent when PDA is put in the picture. What was that like for you? What did you find was really challenging about that? What did you find was easy?
I think it was all pretty challenging, to be fair. I mean, I think the actual sort of change itself, having to sort of realize that everything that I knew about parenting had to be thrown out the window, really. Yeah. As I said, I've got an older child, neurotypical child. He's now 18. I've been brought up very traditionally, and so I took those values, I think, into raising my own children. Worked very, very well with my oldest. Didn't work so well with my second son. It was really difficult because professionals that we were involved with from a young age were kind of reinforcing my belief that I needed to be firmer and set more boundaries and be consistent, which I was already doing, but it wasn't working. I wasn't really being offered any alternative approaches, so it was just do more of the same. It was only really once I came across PDA, he was 8 at the time, so we'd had 8 years of traditional parenting, which went catastrophically wrong for us over that time. It was suddenly, I joined PDA support groups and was being shown different ways to do things. And as I said, at that point, we were at crisis point. And so it was a case of, I've got nothing to lose by trying this. It went completely against what I believed parenting should look like. But when you're sort of fighting a losing battle. You're left with no option but to try things that you haven't tried before. And that was the beginning of the rest of our lives, really, in terms of things getting better for us.
That's amazing. And yeah, I can totally relate to that reaching crisis point. I've talked about it on this channel before, but there seems to be a system in place that requires you reach crisis point before anything really changes. What did crisis look like for you guys? Don't feel you have to answer that, but if it was something you felt comfortable talking about, what did that look like for you guys?
Yeah, I am happy to do that. I will give a little bit of a trigger warning, just in case it's difficult for people to listen to. My son had been quite violent and aggressive from a really, really young age, but that definitely escalated as demands increased, as I wasn't changing my parenting methods and I was being firmer and putting more boundaries in place as he got older. That violence just escalated, really. I was being hit, and that's putting it mildly, on a daily basis, several times a day. We had him grabbing knives, threatening to stab me and himself. We had fire setting regularly in the house and flooding of the house. There was really significant, dangerous behaviour on a daily basis, and he was masking in school. School were telling me it was parenting because it was only happening at home. He was masking at his dad's because I'm a single parent, so I was dealing with this on my own. His dad as well, he doesn't do it with me, you need to be stricter with him. And so it was, I felt very, very alone with this, with no one understanding, being in what I could only describe as an abusive relationship with my child. And I hate using that term because he's my son.
But it is the truth of it, isn't it? I mean, not abusive in the sense that, you know, there's a deliberation to it, but it is, if it was any other form of relationship, I think, and it's something that's often missed, any other form of relationship, it would be get out of there.
Yeah.
But it's changed because it's your flesh and blood, it's your son, it's not, you can't just abandon like that, you can't just walk away. There's so much more to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing I kept saying. If this was my partner, I would have left years ago.
Yes.
And it's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing to say and a horrible thing to admit, but that is the truth of it. And yet still there didn't seem to be any support or help. That was us at crisis point. At that point, I think it was probably a couple of weeks before someone said to me, have you heard of PDA? That I was making arrangements, or starting to make arrangements, for him to go and live with his dad because I couldn't cope any longer.
What was that like when you got presented with PDA? Because I know for myself, and it's something that I, through my Facebook group and through a lot of the people I talk to, when you see that PDA trait list presented, for me, it was like reading a blueprint for my daughter.
Yeah.
Was it that kind of a moment for you as well?
It definitely was. Because obviously we had realised that there was something in the picture that we were not getting. And as many parents do, I was busy on Google researching what it could be, what could be causing these challenges. And I think I must have covered pretty much everything we were looking at. I mean, I looked at autism, ADHD, ODD, conduct disorder, bipolar, and probably everything else around it, and nothing fitted. There were like little bits that fitted, but nothing that really kind of provided that solid answer.
Yeah.
At some point, it was actually following an ADHD assessment that he had. That was kind of like my foot in the door.
Yeah.
We'd had 2 referrals to CAMS by that point, which had been rejected. And I'd asked for an ADHD assessment. The consultant carried out that assessment, said it's not ADHD. And I basically refused to leave the room until he had something to offer us, because to him, you know, I was saying, you know, we can't go on like this. I need something. And so he made a third referral to CAMS. Incidentally, he told me that there were certain words you needed to use on the referral in order to get them to accept it. So he then used those words in his referral, and we were accepted. And the mental health worker he was allocated was due to do a 6-week intervention with him. I was a bit like, well, what's 6 weeks going to do? But we went with it, and we were told by the mental health worker that she thought there were attachment issues. And I then looked up radical attachment disorder. Behaviours fitted pretty well, but the reasoning behind it didn't. Joined a Facebook group, and it was in that group that someone said, have you heard of PDA? And like you were describing, I hadn't heard of it. It hadn't come onto my radar at all. You go on and Google, and there's that list of key features, and every single one, it was like, yep. And along with that came the sort of underlying reasoning behind those behaviours, and suddenly everything clicked into place.
It's sadly such a common story, and I think PDA, of all the forms of autism that are out there and the different way it presents and different traits that it can be applied, I've said before, I think PDA is the hardest form of autism to parent, because you're not dealing with simply, okay, we've got to deal with sensory issues. They're there, but there's more to it. It's not simply dealing with emotional and irregulation and anxiety. It's there, but it's part of it. What you're dealing with is this process of having to overcome the demand avoidance side. And I hear a lot of people say they don't like the phrase pathological demand avoidance. And in fact, it got in the way of us getting it recognised for my daughter, because the CAMS worker we had at one point just refused to use it on the basis that it was called pathological demand avoidance. It's like, okay, I understand your personal beliefs behind it, but you're stopping my daughter getting the support we need because you're just avoiding this altogether. But it's such a hard thing to parent. And I found I had to completely relearn what because my daughter was our firstborn. So in a sense, we were sort of going into it blind, but you've got, I'm 10 and 13 years older than my younger brother and sister. And, I've seen my parents raise kids, and I know, what to do from that perspective. You've learned it, you've seen it. There are societal understandings of how you raise the right things to do and the wrong things to do. But there's so much more complexity when it comes to PDA and having to parent it, because you're having to bypass so many things to get around the demand avoidance side of things, but you're also trying not to trigger those meltdowns. I mean, you spoke just now about the violence and how aggressive it was, and I can totally relate to that. I don't think people realize just what it's like in those moments. And for me, I went through this period where it was kind of a self-loathing almost that became associated, because you get that many people telling you it's your parenting and you're doing it wrong. And so you start to believe that to a degree after a while, because maybe I just do suck. Maybe this is me. But then you'd have those moments where you're being attacked, and then you might lose your temper in those moments. You don't want to, but we're human. And when you're being attacked, and I found that self-loathing really creep in. And I still struggle with it when something's happened and I have to intervene. There's a horrible emotion that comes in afterwards. How do you deal with that yourself personally?
I think it's really, really important to surround yourself with people who are going through similar things and people who get it. I've had to not completely sort of remove myself from, but distance myself from talking about this with people who don't understand, because that constant barrage of you're doing it wrong, it's your parenting, need to be sort of firm is, and even when there's advice being given that's really well intentioned, more often than not, if they don't understand or they haven't experienced something similar, it's really, really unhelpful at best. I have just found that by distancing myself from having those conversations with those people has been really helpful, and finding your tribe, your people who do get it, who do understand, whose advice or comments are going to be, helpful or supportive in the right way. But on top of that, I've learned really to take some time out for myself. I was so consumed by this, and I think when you are in really difficult situations, it can consume you.
Yeah.
And you do really need to do a fair amount of self-care. I make sure at the end of each day that I have my alone time. I like alone time.
Yeah.
Just to sort of decompress. That was quite difficult when the kids were, sort of in their teen years, because they're staying up later, particularly in the earlier teen years, where they still kind of want your attention, but they're staying up later in the evenings. My oldest two are now much older, and they spend most of the time in their rooms anyway, and they're much more independent now. So even though they're still around in the evenings, I can still kind of get my downtime, going out for walks, meditation, things like that. I really believe in, it's the old putting your own gas mask on first, isn't it? Or oxygen mask, not exactly, gas mask, oxygen mask. I really found that, if you're in a better place mentally, emotionally, even physically, then you're better equipped to sort of support your kids.
I think that's so true. And it's one of those things that gets, there's a feeling of selfishness that comes with it, and you put it on yourself, and it can appear to be selfish to be putting yourself first in that way. But like you said, the whole thing with the oxygen mask, I say it a lot, you need to be your best in yourself to be your best for your family. And unless you're taking that time for self-care at some level, then it's only going to reflect in how you're able to manage things, and especially with the extra tension and stress that it brings when you're raising neurodivergent kids, especially PDA kids. It's so much more elevated, and unless you're taking that time, you are going to collapse and crumble under the pressure, aren't you? So you went from this, so you've got the diet, well, probably not an actual PDA diagnosis, because that's really hard to get in the UK, but you've got the knowledge that PDA is there, you've got the autism diagnosis, you got involved with these groups at some point. I mean, this is something I see in so many people in this community, and it's one of the things I love about it, is I very rarely meet someone who's gone through this who goes, well, we got through that, now it's time for me. But people really want to pay it forward, and give back to those that, like you said yourself, those who are supporting and have supported you through, and it creates this pay it forward culture within this sort of disability and SEND community in particular. I think, what was your next step for that? Was it something that was like a sort of sailing into it, or was it a conscious decision at one point to go, right, I'm going to now do this?
I think for me, it started in those support groups. Once I'd gone through the support groups as someone who was learning, and I think we continuously learn even beyond that, but once we got the basics and started seeing improvements, I could see how it was impacting our lives in a positive way. And so I was then able, I think, within these support groups to offer our experiences in support of other people who were posting, who are at the start of their journeys in understanding. So it started there, and there was always a desire to do something with this. It was such a life-changing moment for me, and I know that sounds really, I don't know, maybe a bit excessive, life-changing.
No, to me it doesn't. I think they are significant moments that really do take us through the eureka moments almost.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was particularly the journey through getting the support in place in education. So we went through the EHCP process. It was highly traumatic as a parent going through that. We had no support from the school. The local authority were being fairly obstructive. I just couldn't believe, and we had a similar journey with diagnosis as well. We did end up going private in the end after many years of trying to navigate the NHS. It basically boiled down to he didn't tick enough boxes for an NHS ASD diagnosis. They didn't recognise PDA in our area. But if we lived somewhere else, and the psychologist said to me, if you lived somewhere else that did recognise it, he'd probably be diagnosed with that. But we can offer you a conduct disorder diagnosis. I was like, no, thank you. So we ended up going private. But that kind of, I don't know, I had a lot of faith in the systems prior to dealing with this, and I trusted that those who were in those positions,
the authority position, power position, almost, decision makers.
I thought they would do things with ours and my child's best interests at heart, but it soon became apparent that wasn't always the case in our experience.
Yeah,
seemed rarely the case.
It seems to be a system at the moment, and funnily enough, I talked about this a couple of days ago. There was this, the ITV have done this little expose of what's really going on with the assessment process for people who are on disability benefits and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And discovering that more is being spent overturning the decisions that have been made to cut back than is actually being saved by cutting back by a considerable amount. And we have a system that seems to, I haven't said this before, but I think it's true. We haven't, they seem to approach it with an attitude of guilty until proven innocent. So you're trying to deceive them until they can prove otherwise, and they don't see it any other way. And they're forced into that by, sadly, the authorities that are in place, the government that is here. And I'm not trying to make it a political thing. I think whichever government's in charge, we see very similar things take place. It all comes back to what they perceive as immediate dollar pound signs on the thing. And there's no forward thinking to it at all. Yeah. But it puts people under, like you say, that the EHCP process is so traumatic. The benefits process, and people don't realize how much it costs extra raising a child with special educational needs, because you're dealing with sensory issues and you're dealing with, so much more and equipment that's required. How do we overcome that? How do we get that message out there, do you think?
I think by talking about it, doing what you're doing, putting on this event that we have on the 15th of May. As you said, there is this need within this community to talk about it and educate and pay it forwards. And I think the more people we can reach, it will hopefully start to change things. But I think ultimately it's a really huge challenge. I'd like to think positively that there could be a huge overhaul in the education system, in how things are kind of run from top down. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, if we're realistic. But I think we've seen changes in other areas come about over the years, in terms of when you look at LGBTQIA plus, etc. We're not anywhere near where we need to be, but we've come a long way.
Yeah.
And I think by talking about it more, the same can be achieved with PDA, with autism, with, SEND in general. We just need to keep plugging away at it.
The difficult part is we spend so much time preaching to the converted almost, because the people who hear the message are the people who are being brought into that. So I'll say it again, I liken it to Hogwarts, where you sort of get brought into this invisible community that's been there all along, but you had no idea about. But there are a community of people who are there, and it's somehow getting it across to the average man, woman, child on the street to understand what's going on, and more importantly to the people who are in charge of doing this, the governments, the authorities, the councils, and trying to inject some compassion in there and some understanding. And like you say, it's come some way. I actually think we are further along than we could be. The difficulty we hit is that, unlike LGBTQ+, unlike racism, unlike genderism, sexism, all those kind of things, ableism has a price tag that's attached, because to become a less ableist society, even at a basic level, if you're going to look at the people who are very obviously physically disabled, it costs money to make adaptations. It costs money to make a living environment that's going to work more effectively and more fairly for those people. Because you've got that price tag attached, it all gets resisted so heavily. And, you know, it brings it back to this whole thing with, you know, the cost of raising kids who have special educational needs and disabilities. It is so much more. I don't think people realize the extra price tags that are attached to things. And my Tigger, who I do the Across the Neurodivide podcast on here with, and I said Tigger has this thing of using blue tack as a stimming device. And it's great because it's quite cheap and you can use it, and no one really pays attention. He's just playing with a bit of blue tack. We were making the joke, you should put sensory in front of it, and we could sell sensory blue tack and charge 5 times as much just because it's sensory. You know? And I don't think people understand it. So it's trying to build that bridge, isn't it? And get across to the people who don't understand and get that understanding. So you had your son and you learnt to deal with PDA. Well, I imagine you're the same as me. It's a learning process every day, but you know, you start to, then you've had another son and he's autistic also. How was that adjusting? I'm guessing you had to adjust parenting again.
Yeah, in some ways, I think I recognised in him really quite early on. I think because once you have an autistic child, you're kind of
becomes like a ninth sense, doesn't it? Yeah,
you spot the signals quite early. He is much more typical in the way he presents, but he does also have demand avoidance. He's not PDA, but he does have demand avoidance. So the PDA strategies do tend to be helpful for him, but he does need more of that structure and routine to help support him than my PDA does. And that has been quite challenging. He had massive issues with sleep, and the need for him to be rigid over certain things was quite difficult. I guess really when I think about it now, I mean, he's 10 now and he's homeschooled. Again, he had difficulties with anxiety around school, and ultimately that affected his attendance, so now we homeschool. In comparison, and I say this hesitantly because I don't like comparing kids. Every kid is different regardless of whether there's autism or not.
Almost, isn't it?
Yeah. But in terms of behaviourally, he's significantly easier than my PDA. And I think once you've dealt with the level of adaptation that you need to with a PDA, you're already there in terms of you know making those adaptations. You're already in that mindset of how can we resolve this, how can we make it better, what do I need to do to support this child. It's different and easier than going from a neurotypical child and typical parenting techniques to something completely opposite. So actually it's been a lot easier adapting to his needs. Behaviorally much different. We don't have the level of aggression that we had with my PDA.
From there you went on to start Positive PDA. What happened? What was the thought process behind that? What inspired it?
Basically, I haven't been able to work for quite some time. I had to give up work when we were going through the ADHD process. Everything became too much. I did go back to work temporarily once he was in specialist school, and then we had the difficulties with my younger child and I had to give that up again. And as I said, I wanted to give something back, and I set up the Positively PDA Facebook page to kind of share my story and reach out to people going through the same thing. I ultimately, and I've been thinking about this for years, but I just hadn't been in the right place emotionally and sort of in terms of family dynamics to do anything with it. I wanted to kind of set up something that was missing when we were at crisis point and beyond. And we had the support groups and they were fantastic. They definitely did get us through that. But what I felt I needed was a place to go or someone to reach out to who just got it, who I could regularly check in with, someone consistent and understanding, who could reassure me that I was doing the right things at the right time, that I could speak about specific situations and just kind of talk them through with someone who understood the PDA approach.
Yep.
That's what I was trying to achieve, and that was ultimately what was behind Positively PDA. And it's just really grown from there. You know, I offer kind of one-to-one sessions with people, and the feedback I've got is that it has been really helpful. And alongside that, we also run the support group on Clubhouse. And again, the feedback from that has been brilliant. There was one particular chap who came into that room last year. He's a dad of a PDA, and he came in and you could just tell by his voice where he was in the stage of their journey, and it was heartbreaking because you can resonate with that so much, and it takes you back to when you were also at that stage. Absolutely. And he attended our rooms regularly and shared their journey, and probably not quite a year on, maybe 6-8 months on, you know, the change that you see in people who come along and share their experiences and receive support from the community it's so rewarding. But it's not about what I get out of it.
It's the joy of seeing somebody else helped in that way, isn't there? It's more blissful to give than to receive, kind of a situation. That's amazing. I love hearing stories like that where people come in and find that support they need, and it can often just be an understanding ear. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. What you're doing is amazing. So this obvious move to Clubhouse, and obviously what we've got is coming up, as we said at the beginning, is the PDA Day Summit, really is what it is. So what's involved with that? Who's going to be, obviously I am speaking at that, everyone, and you're going to join, and I'll put the details up of that. But what? Who else is going to be there? What else is going to be covered on that day?
So the 15th of May is a Sunday this year. The event is running from 9 a.m. until 10 p.m. We have got, obviously, yourself. We've got some PDA adults, so Julia Daunt.
Fantastic. Who was just involved with Nicola Ricci on the PDA Day Summit. It's just happened.
Yeah, brilliant.
And she's with the PDA Society, isn't she? She's actually a member of,
Rico Ryuki, who's another PDA adult. Jim Salzberg, another PDA adult. We've also got, at the very end of the evening, Helen Evans, who's the CEO of the PDA Society, coming to talk about the charity and their 5-year plan and do a Q&A session.
And she's a PDA herself as well. Yeah.
Lots of different people. Yourself. We've got Laura Kirby from Nest, Libby Hill, who's a speech and language therapist, quite well known within the PDA community, and some of the people who are regulars in the room that I run, speaking on other topics. So there's going to be things, we're going to be covering ASD and PDA with LGBTQIA+. We're going to be covering sort of what is PDA, the key features, dealing with meltdowns. Obviously, yourself is going to be covering masking.
Masking, one of my passions.
Julia and Jim are going to be covering PDA and puberty, which I think is one of those, topics that when we've got younger children, we always kind of look at with dread.
When you've got a PDA, we're literally going through it now, and it is actually, I think it's the point of crisis for many. It was for us. The point where it really hit the wall and things really started going downhill was when you mixed PDA traits with hormones and changing bodies, and it was, you're right. The dread that people already view puberty with, I think, is something else when you include PDA.
Definitely.
It sounds like an amazing event. How can people sign up to be part of it?
There is a Facebook group at present, which is where all the information about it is being shared. Clubhouse is because it's audio only, it's quite tricky to sort of share information about it on Clubhouse. So all the information is in the PDA Day event, which is within my page, Positively PDA.
I will put links in the description.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for that, head to the description and hop on over. I'll also try and put a card up here so that you guys can just click to it if you need to.
Yeah, so all the details, information will be in there, how to access Clubhouse, and I'm going to be putting some sort of introductory videos for the speakers in there so people can get to know who's speaking. And it's got the links to Clubhouse. You will need to download the Clubhouse app. It's free to download from whatever app store you're on, whether that's iOS or Android.
Yep.
It will all be hosted in there. I think the great thing is that it is audio only. So you can plug your earphones in and get on with the rest of your day, which is what I tend to do when I'm on Clubhouse as well. So it's fantastic.
That's brilliant. Look, guys, get behind it. It is going to be fantastic. As I say, I am speaking, I'm doing masking. I'll be on at 7:30 on the day. But there is so much more to be involved with. And to be honest, the fact that what I really love about this actually is that you've included so many PDAers themselves, whilst also bringing in the adjacent people to dealing with PDA. But you know, on my channel, I always go on about asking autistics and including that element in the discussion because it's so important. And this is an example of an event that really is embracing PDAs themselves as and I really would recommend tuning in, especially to Helen from the PDA Society. She's a PDA herself. She's the CEO of the PDA Society, and they were an amazing help to me. I'm guessing they were probably a help with you guys when you were going through it all. I've recently become an ambassador for them, so it's something I'm quite passionate about. But yeah, do get on it. It's going to be a fantastic event. 15th of May, hop onto the Facebook page. As I say, all links will be in the description. I want to thank you so much for joining me. It's been fantastic hearing your story.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I literally could sort of do this all day long.
I'm the same. I had to know when to put a timer on myself because I could just talk with it. But no, hearing your story, hearing the background, and how personal it is for you, and again, the element of giving back, I think it's an amazing thing. So please do check it out, everyone. As I say always, please do hit like, hit subscribe, and ring the bell. You'll always know when new content's coming up, and it does help with the algorithms to get the message out there. I will see you again on the next episode, but in the meantime, stay safe.